morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is, wherever you are right now. Thank you for tuning in to the Conversations with Dr. Don show. The show is produced and broadcast from the Portland, Oregon, USA studios. And for your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people, like most of you out there, about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and about whatever it is we have decided to talk about. And this evening it's going to be about the death penalty and a lot of stuff that goes along with that. And my guests, Frank Thompson and Ron Steiner, have been on about 2 or 3 years ago, and we talked about the death penalty. But it was so interesting what you guys contributed and the feedback I got. I wanted to have you on again to bring us up to speed with what's going on.
Well, thank you.
You're an excellent guest in the past. So
Thanks for inviting us.
2 years from now, you're on again.
All right.
2 years from now, we want to have the
Sounds
job
like a
done.
deal.
Yeah, hopefully. I'm not as nervous as I usually am. I've been doing this for years and years. When I've got new guests, I'm still a little nervous. But you were on before, so as I look at you and I see your peacefulness, I'm not tense anymore, so I'm fine. How are you?
I'm fine.
Yeah. Are you
Feeling very relaxed with you. Yep.
Thank you very much.
You have a calming effect on us.
Thank you. And the richness of your baritone helps me a lot too. I like that. So as you know, the show goes in 2 parts. First part is we talk about who you are personally, so the viewers have an idea where you're coming from when you talk about whatever you're saying in the second half of the show, pretty much. So we'll see how much time it takes to cover the bio part, the first half, and this will allow us more time to talk about the death penalty in the second half. So we'll play it by ears from now on out. Who shall I talk to first right now on
Go
the
ahead and
bio
talk
part?
with Frank first.
Frank, you ready?
Yeah.
You remember the questions I asked you last time?
Do I remember them?
Yeah.
No, not really.
Good.
I remember I remember the thrust of the conversation, but not particularly.
Yeah.
But I'm here since 1994. I assumed administration of the Oregon State Penitentiary. Came from Arkansas.
Well, let's talk about something else first and save that for the second.
Ah.
Okay.
Okay.
Why did we choose this title, the death penalty? Why did we choose this title for the show, the death penalty? Because we're talking about the death penalty?
Well, we're talking about an effort to get it repealed in the state of Oregon. I'm a board member of the Oregonians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty, and we have for some time been focused on getting the word out, educating those who are middle of the road, and so organizing concerted efforts to try and get the death penalty repealed here in the state of Oregon.
Frank, if I was to ask your best friend, who is Frank? What would your best friend say? Be your best friend. Frank is what?
Frank is a Christian, law enforcement professional, family man who enjoys during his retirement years fishing and his family, an activist. I've been an activist almost all of my life. A people person, and that's about it.
How did you get to be that way?
You know, that's a tough question. I didn't start out with any plans of being this way. One experience led to another. I've always followed my passions. The way I was raised, I always was instructed to take a look at what my strengths are and find something that matches them. And coming up through the civil rights era, those challenges in those arenas were always of an interest to me. So I developed a passion for becoming involved and making a difference. Whether I've been successful or not, that's for others around me to assess, but I've sort of followed a thirst for trying to make a difference or getting involved.
You are well-spoken, particularly with what you're talking about. So let me continue on. And when and where were you born?
Small town just north of Little Rock, Arkansas.
Little Rock.
Yes. And came up during the Little Rock school crisis when the Little Rock Nine integrated it in 1957, and the governor shut down the schools to keep from integrating it.
I remember.
And Dwight D. Eisenhower sent the federal troops in the Little Rock to force the integration of the schools. I can remember hearing the Army vehicles coming into town the night that the state National Guard were federalized by Dwight D. Eisenhower.
How old were you then?
I was 13.
13. And you still
13.
remember?
Oh, yes, vividly. Vividly.
Why were you born?
Pardon?
Why were you born?
It was the destiny of God's will. His almighty plan. Why was I born? To fulfill a purpose, I guess.
What was that purpose?
To contribute, raise a family, and to contribute to my community. Now, if you had asked me that at age 13, I wouldn't have been able to even start answering the question, because there was so much life and so many possibilities. But looking back over my life right now, I see I've followed a pattern of wanting to become involved. And there was no real strategy. One experience led to another. It's almost like a stair step.
Sure.
Each rung gave me the ability to see further into the distance based on my experience and maturation process, if you will. So that's sort of a rambling response, but that's who I am.
It's a good rambling response. And you had some models at that time to look up to. And we'll get to that question later on.
Certainly.
Anything significant about your racial or cultural heritage, or what you see, what you get?
Now, what you see is what you get. I think my ethnic upbringing, of course, is significantly molded by overcoming challenges, and I see them as having a positive impact. I don't think I deal with any persecution complexes. I recognize discrimination and the disadvantages as having been opportunities for me to overcome, and it's strengthened my activism commitments.
We've come a long way, haven't we?
There's been a lot of improvement in the right direction,
Yeah.
but we got a long way to go.
Yeah.
But it's like the fight toward good health. You're always fighting to be healthy. And as a society, we can't ever say that we've arrived. The moment that we say that we've got it made in race relationships and we are there in inclusiveness and diversity, that's when we've messed up. So it's a perpetual and ongoing struggle.
I got someone to just talk with just between you and I, so we'll let him come back next week and pick him. He's so
Not at all.
delightful.
He's good.
This is
You
my
guys
mentor.
are so,
He's good.
yes,
This is
I
my
know.
mentor.
I know.
Yeah.
So let me continue on. A religious preference. You mentioned you're a Christian.
Baptist?
You're Baptist,
Yes.
And that's useful for you, being a Baptist.
Being a Christian
A Christian.
is very important to me. Denominations, and the reason I said Baptist, most people who will hear my name or recognize me, and they remember my orientation as a Baptist, but I am practically non-denominational. I don't wear the denomination title out front. If you hadn't asked me, it wouldn't have been important at all.
Yeah.
But a Christian, certainly.
You're practicing Christian.
Practicing Christian.
That's a leading question. What is a practicing Christian versus just a Christian?
A practicing Christian is one that has principles that guide the way of thinking and the way of acting.
And you walk the talk?
Oh, I struggle every day.
I told you to put it off.
I thought I had.
I struggle every day to try and live up to those standards. We're imperfect people. We were born that way. And you are always struggling to be better.
Yeah. I get so charmed listening to you talk until I lose track of my questions. Okay, and your formal education?
Undergraduate degree in social work. I've done graduate studies in law school and public administration.
Any other education worth mentioning besides just living day to day?
Well, I've had a lot of training associated with my profession, which has been law enforcement and corrections, but no law school and public administration in the college level is the extent of my education.
So how many years of law enforcement and that sort of activity for you?
City police, military policeman, criminal investigator, warden and superintendent of prisons, 32 years.
That's a while, huh?
It's been a while.
And you can still be friendly and warm to strangers?
I'm getting better. There were those who knew me as a high school student who, after years of being in law enforcement, would see me at high school reunions and they would ask me what happened, and that I'd taken on a more conservative or more cautious approach to those that I didn't realize that was happening to me.
Of course.
But now that I've retired, I'm getting my legs back. I'm smiling more frequently, and it's the absence of stress is healthy.
Yeah. And how long you been retired?
Going on 6 wonderful years.
6 wonderful years. I heard
6
wonderful.
wonderful years.
Yeah. What have you been doing to occupy your time since your retirement?
I've
Fishing?
been fortunate in having joined OADP and being able to appear before the public, speaking engagements, before state legislatures across the country, in fact, and promoting efforts to repeal the death penalty. A part of my experience, quite frankly, has been I was asked to appear before the legislature in the state of Maryland just before the state, in fact, repealed the death penalty. And I also appeared before the state legislature in Nebraska just prior to its legislature repealing the death penalty. So I see those as being some really, really important accomplishments.
Of course.
Not that I made the difference, just that I had a little bit of part in that taking place.
Mm-hmm. And you have a partner, a boyfriend, a girlfriend. You got to include all the possibilities there, you know.
I have a wonderful wife.
Uh-huh.
Her name is Deborah.
Deborah.
And we both live in Salem. I have a 28-year-old daughter named Chioma. And she has blessed us with a daughter, granddaughter, and her name is Laisha. She's all of 3 years old, bouncing off the walls on a regular basis. They live 2,000 miles from us, and thank God for FaceTime. We see them every day, and we just love the time we spend with them.
They're fortunate to have you. Your political persuasion, are you a Tea Partier, a right-winger, a left-winger, or what?
I really, and you know, sometimes it sounds like a cop-out. I really like to look at the issues and vote for the candidate that supports most things that are, but if you look at my history, I have probably been more on the side of the Democrat than any other. Each time, though, I try to look at the candidate and I try to look at the issues and make a choice of the person that promotes where I'd like to go with my life and my country, and more often than not, that has been in the Democratic category. I resist the label, though, of being a Democrat or a Republican, or because that sort of locks me into what I'm supposed to do and think and act.
Well, for me, those terms are still useful, and I can look at them in terms of practical sense and what their generic meaning was years ago before people considered them a label in terms of, are you a liberal or a conservative, left wing or right wing? How would you characterize yourself on that continuum? Are you a lefty or a righty or
a liberal? Well, today I'm looking at the issues and what strikes me in terms of what motivates me. But if you look back over my history and my behaviors, I probably, now having been in law enforcement, that was a conservative part of me, surprisingly to many people who've known me over the years. But the civil rights side and the activist side is fairly liberal. And sometimes those two tendencies have to do a balancing act.
Of course. Yeah. We've got to allow some time. Memberships in political, social, and civic organizations. And you mentioned some alphabet soup earlier on, and I forgot what it meant. OADP.
Oregonians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty.
Say it again, please.
Oregonians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty.
Yeah, okay, I wanted to be sure the viewers heard that. And persons from the past or alive today that you look up to or admire, any names come to mind for you?
Persons of the past that I look up to?
Either from the past or alive today that you look up to.
My father. My
Why
father.
So? Why your father?
He was not a man that spent a lot of time talking. He had a way of looking at you that said volumes. But because I had a lot of opportunities to watch him, I'd watch him in the community, in the church, the way he dealt, the way he would attract fellowship. And he imparted to me in just the ways he lived, things that still become apparent to me. That was a calm that he had in the face of crisis, challenges that I've tried to emulate all my life. Because I feel there's a part of me that's not very calm, but so my father.
Uh-huh. Anybody else come to mind?
My life is in chapters.
Of course.
And each chapter has an outstanding personality.
I'll bet.
That was pivotal in one way or another. But my father has woven himself through all of those years. But I could call a number of names that, depending on the military, college, in church, there are different names. None that anybody within the sound of my voice would recognize. But there have been some people that have stood out. My minister at one stage in my life was very important.
Have you written your autobiography?
No, not to be published. I have not.
You need to.
Thank you.
You have some delightful stories, I'm sure.
I appreciate that. That's a compliment.
So shall we leave you now and go over here to Ron?
Certainly. I think you'll find it really interesting. Certainly.
Thank you. You ready for me?
Yes, sir. Whenever you're ready.
I'm going to give you a trick question, too, when you least expect it.
Okay.
All right? And when and where were you born?
I was born in 1939 in Indiana, Pennsylvania, a little coal mining town, western Pennsylvania, about 60 miles from Pittsburgh.
Oh, way over there, and now you're on the West Coast.
Through a circuitous route, I got to Oregon, yes.
Okay. Anything significant about your cultural or national or racial heritage, or are you plain old American white bread?
No, I don't think I'm plain American white bread. My father's family were Hungarian Jews. My mother's family was Italian.
Mm-hmm.
And all my grandparents came to this country as adults. Mm-hmm. So there's not a lot of history back to the original colonies there.
Okay. Yeah. And do you have a religious preference today?
I'm a Catholic.
Oh my God, I've been there, done that.
Yeah. Well,
I was an altar boy for years.
Lots of my friends have that experience, and my own children do too. They're wonderful people, and they appreciate the upbringing in terms of character development.
You an active Catholic anymore?
Yes. No, I go to church regularly.
Oh my gosh, I miss
Try and do things for my church.
I'm a humanist now.
I knew that.
Atheist.
I've been with your group a couple of times, which was quite delightful.
Of course, yeah. And yet, when I hear that somebody who is a Catholic, there's something that still lingers in here that I get. There's some things I'm mad about, but there's some things that those formative years, yeah. The ritual and the priests, and especially when I was an altar boy doing my thing. And by the way, I asked you about Christianity because one of my heroes, my first hero probably, is Jesus Christ.
Okay.
And I'm a humanist now, yes. But anyhow, I'm getting into my story now instead of yours. So, in your formal education,
I went to college in Western Pennsylvania. I was not a good student. I was a sociology major, but I graduated. I guess my preference were beer, football, and girls, but
Good
I got
Catholic
through
boy.
there. I got through there. All right.
And when did you retire from? What were you doing in your work during
I
your life?
spent about 40 years in the television business.
Oh yes, I
On
remember
the
that.
sales management side of it, not on the camera side like yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked for a television station in Pittsburgh originally as an advertising salesperson, then sales management. I ran a couple of stations, one in Toledo, Ohio, one in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And then I consulted with people who owned stations for about 30 years.
And you consulted with them. What did you do? Help them to manage?
Sales training, marketing, and management
A
training.
whole bunch of stuff, huh?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
That industry has changed dramatically since I started way back in 1966.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
So when did you stop working formally and you switched into something else, into retirement?
I worked really hard. My work ethic came from my dad. My dad was a butcher, a retailer, and he worked 7 days a week and taught us how to work hard. And so I worked really hard, and my job was to support my family. And then I saw my children, who were high school age, starting to get into community service things. And I saw the things that they were doing, and they were amazing to me. And eventually I said, I need to start doing some of that stuff. So I had the image that I was going to retire from pay work a good while ago, but it took a long time to do that. But I started in 1992 to do some volunteer work, first with Habitat for Humanity, and then a children's charity in New Mexico where I live to keep Native American kids in school. And then I got involved with a transition program for formerly incarcerated people to try and help them get started back in the community and not reoffend. And that led me to have the occasion to meet Sister Helen Prejean.
Oh, you did?
And Sister Helen said some things at a speech she made in our banquet we had as a fundraiser, and it just sort of lit my candle to say, I need to learn a little bit more about this because I didn't know anything about the death penalty, never paid attention to the death penalty.
You had a few words with her?
Oh yeah, I was the chairman of the board at the time of this. Dismas House was the name of the charity, and we got her to come and do that. And since then, we've been together half a dozen times up here in Oregon. We try and bring her back as often as she can. She's a wonderful woman. She's one of my heroes. You asked the question about heroes. She's one of my heroes.
Good for you. Yeah. Same question. Are you a left? Are you a lefty, a righty, a tea partier, or?
I'm a combination. I'm
without labeling you.
Yeah, I'd say I'm fiscally conservative and socially progressive. And like Frank, I try and vote on the issues and the people, not being restricted in party.
Yeah, I would ask a simple question about the presidential campaign, but we've only got an hour to go, so I won't go there. That's quite interesting with what's going on there. Partner.
I have a wife, Karen Ann. She's a lovely person. She's a photographer. We live in Salem. We're a melded family. Both of us have children from previous marriages, and we have 6 kids between us and 12 grandkids.
Do they like Grandpa?
I love it. I love it. It's one of the great joys of living is having grandchildren.
Yeah. Memberships in political or social organizations, other than the one we mentioned earlier on. You can mention that again to be sure.
Yeah.
Organs for alternatives to the death
At the
penalty.
moment, that's the only one I'm associated with. I've been involved in all these other different charities along the way and nonprofits, things of that nature. But this is the only one that I'm involved with presently.
So other than Sister Helen Prejean, anybody else to look up to or admire particularly?
Well, my folks were wonderful people and sort of different. While my dad was the worker and taught us how to work, my mother was lots of fun, and she taught us how to have fun and have a good time and how to dance and how to tell stories and stuff like that.
You still know how to do that?
Yeah. And William Wilberforce is a hero of mine. I look up to him primarily for the endurance that he had in his cause. If your viewers don't know who that was, he led the British Parliament to get rid of slavery. In 25 years he worked on that issue, and that's the thing I admire, his tenacity to stay with that for all that time.
Are you a do-gooder or one of those people?
I don't know if I'm a do-gooder, but I learned something not all that long ago. I'm a happy person. And what I heard was if you find something that is meaningful in your life, or you search for things that are meaningful in your life, you will find happiness. So if being a do-gooder is finding things that you think are helpful to our society, to our culture, to our community, I do good. I try and do good. Sometimes I wonder about the speed of the progress, but I try. And that's why I look at people like William Wilberforce to keep my hand on the plow.
How did you get to be the kind of a person that you are? What happened to you when you were growing up? What made you how you are?
We were all taught, my brother and my sister and I, we were all taught to be honest, to tell the truth, to be good to other people, be kind to other people, to think of everybody as the same as us. So I think I had some good core values there. I always thought very much about fairness, and that was the pivotal point in Sister Helen's talk. Yeah. But she said some things, and I just said, that's not fair, and it hit that core value. And so fairness is one of the issues that I try and stick close to.
It reminds me of justice, and those two are so important. Maybe there's one or two bottom line considerations in weighing all of those considerations that make me what I am, but I think those two will probably be deep in my makeup, such that I behave that way, walk the talk, yeah. But again, I'm talking about me, so let's take a break, and then we'll talk about the death penalty. Can we take a break, Mr. Director? Well, thanks for staying tuned. I'm glad you didn't run away. And for you viewers who missed the opening of the show, you're watching Conversations with Dr. Don. It's an ongoing series of one of our standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique individuals and whatever it is that we've been talking about. So far, we've been talking about who they are personally, and now we're going to talk about the death penalty, which is the title of our show. And they were on 2 or 3 years ago, and such delightful guests. And I learned so much from them. I want to have them on again. And I got a promise so far. They haven't admitted to it yet, but 3 or 4 years from now, I'll have them back on again.
Okay.
You guys are delightful guests, and I'm not just polishing the apple.
I appreciate that. We enjoy it.
So, why did you choose that title? I asked you that before. The death penalty. Is that important enough to spend an hour talking about it?
I've been spending years talking about it. Yeah, I think it is a very important thing.
Okay.
And one of the things that I think is so important, it's not about people on death row as much as it is about us, the people who have this system that is patently unfair, is biased, is costly, ineffective. And that's why we work so hard about it. And that's why it's so important.
I asked you for some prompting questions. You gave them to me, and I want us to go spontaneously with what you want to talk about. Or shall we address the questions, or shall I?
However you want to do it. If you want to do it, it doesn't matter. I mean, we talk about these things in lots of different contexts, so we can just have conversation about it very easily.
Why the death penalty? Why is it that we can have the governing system kill another human being? I like to talk in straight language rather than euphemisms.
Absolutely.
Why do humans have a death penalty? And that's a pretty broad, probably impossible consideration.
Well, it certainly has been with this country a long time. And you're finding that many other countries don't have the death penalty. We are among few industrialized, advanced societies that still have the death penalty. And it has been, and our way of dealing, and broadly supported, of dealing with the criminal element and feeling that it was effective. The death penalty more recently is being viewed with its shortcomings. There are a lot of people who are holding on to past. They don't know what the future is going to look like without the death penalty. Fear. The death penalty has a history of being discriminatory against minorities. It's extremely costly, and some of the comments I'm sure Ron will. But the death penalty right now sort of lingers around because I think our society broadly doesn't know what the alternatives are, and thus part of the name of our organizations. So that's why we still have it. I think the wind is at our back. There are a lot of things that are beginning to happen in our country that's causing our public to take another look at it, because not so much of what to do with the people on death row, but so much what is happening to ourselves by having the death penalty, and whether or not as a public policy it accomplishes anything. And that's what that's what OADP is largely behind. We believe that our public wants public policies that accomplish something for the good of society. And roundly speaking, by every measure, the death penalty fails. It's expensive, it's discriminatory, there's increasing evidence that it kills innocent people, that it creates victims, more than the victims who were apparent in the original commission of the crime. So that's why the death penalty is still here.
Would it be as easy to talk about killing another human being, or the state killing another human being, when you see it in those terms, rather than the death penalty? And I don't have an answer to that. I'm just wondering.
Well, there's a couple of things that you can address in that regard. The death penalty is sort of the tip of the sword in terms of the iconic tough on crime argument. We live in a pretty violent culture. Our country has incarcerated more people than any other country in the world, I think, maybe other than Russia. We have more murders than any of our allies. We have lots of violence. And the death penalty, a lot of people hang on to it because they think that that's the epitome of being tough on crime, when the government can kill one of its citizens. Well, what we try and focus on, that we are the government, and somebody has to carry out those executions. So the people who have to carry that out, and Frank has that unique experience that he can talk to. What are the effects on those people who are asked to do that job? And what are the effects on us as the public who stand behind those people and say that's the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do?
Did you execute any people when you were a warden and in those positions in the penal system?
The only two people to have been executed in the state of Oregon over the past 50 years, I was responsible for seeing to it that that public policy was carried out. 2 people were killed in the name of the Oregonian public under my administration.
How do you feel about that today?
I feel that it has given me focus of purpose to do everything I possibly can to see that the death penalty is repealed in the state of Oregon. And that sense of responsibility is fairly strong because in the state of Oregon, I'm the only one who's had the responsibility at the level and at the of responsibility to carry out the killing of a person in the name of the public. Now, I supported the death penalty until that, but all of the flaws of the death penalty had followed me up to that point, but somehow or another, I incorporated it in my years of law enforcement as being one of the many flawed systems in our society that over time might get better, might become improved, and at some point it will be a manageable system. But when I realized that I was training decent men and women into taking the life of a human being in the name of a public policy that could not be shown to work, that did not make our public safer, and in fact, created victims of those of us who were charged with carrying it out, I began, in the process of having to conduct these executions, I changed my position. I had my Saul to Paul moment.
Yeah. So I wonder, what is it in these other countries that don't have a death penalty? What happened to them where they decided not to kill their citizens? Any speculation on what that's about?
It goes back quite a ways. I mean, the history of the world has conflict and violence and killing throughout.
Sure.
But the modern, if you'd call this modern, Italy was the first European country when they became one country. They were all little city-states to unify in 1847, and they abolished the death penalty at that point in time.
Wow, that's a long...
Since then, all of those people in Europe, you can't belong to the European Union if you have a death penalty. All of those countries understood the point of that it is useless, it is senseless, it says something about us as a people, and they got rid of it. They have lower crime. I mean, people say, well, the death penalty is a deterrent. It gets people not to want to kill. Well, that has no basis at all in fact or in research. So they realize that the murder rate in the United States is like 9 times what it is in most of the European countries. So we still have a death penalty, but fortunately, things are changing. The death penalty is losing favor, and Frank has some statistics that he can share with you about last year, the diminishing number of death sentences, the diminishing number of executions, the geographic concentration of where they happen, that all are indicating that people here in the United States are learning that this doesn't work and we have better alternatives to think about.
So the death penalty is not existing in all the states.
It does not.
Yeah. How many states roughly still have the death penalty and how many don't? Which is the balance there?
32 still have, 30, maybe 31, depending on what happens in Nebraska, because the legislature repealed the death penalty, but their governor, who is a very tough on crime kind of a character, has put it back on the ballot for the vote of the people. So it'll be 31 or 32. In the last, since 2006, 7 states have gotten rid of the death penalty. Nobody has brought it back.
So the wind is at our back.
The wind is at our back, yes, very much so.
Yeah, so I'm going to skip being spontaneous and go back to your questions here.
Okay.
What is going on around the country in regard to the death penalty? We just answered that pretty much, I think. What is going on?
There's one other issue that we should insert with the demise and the death of Justice Scalia.
Yes.
It's opened up a whole other situation that is evidence of the politicizing of these issues. Justice Scalia was an ardent supporter of the death penalty.
Yes.
He was one of the conservative votes that continued to want to have the death penalty. So now we have a situation where Obama is going to get to nominate somebody It's in his rights in the Constitution. That's the way it happens, and the Senate has to approve or disapprove of his nominees.
Sure.
So it's become very political, but a change in the court may change the situation because there have been other rulings in recent years where they disallowed, made unconstitutional the killing of juveniles if they committed their crime as juveniles, and the killing and execution of mentally disabled.
Yeah.
So getting rid of the death penalty altogether is the next logical step, and that might be a big impact with the change of the court.
And Scalia was Catholic.
Scalia was a Catholic,
Yeah.
and Sister Helen met him accidentally in an airport and reminded him sternly about that.
Did she? You got some stories. I'll bet some more if we had another couple hours. So in Oregon, what's going on with the death penalty? You think you talked about it a little bit. We're moving in that direction.
We are moving in that direction. Our job as Oregonians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty is to promote the conversation because we need a vote of the people here. Unlike the other states that can abolish the death penalty in their legislatures, it's in our Constitution, so it's required that the people will get to vote. So in order to vote knowledgeably, we are trying to provoke the discussion in all kinds of venues, schools, churches, libraries, any place we can get people to talk about it without diminishing them or disrespecting people of a different opinion. Get them to think about, learn about, talk about the death penalty, because most people don't know very much about it, quite frankly.
Yeah.
They have a reaction if asked the question, do you support it or oppose it? But it comes from some core value rather than some knowledge of the facts that surround the death penalty.
Yeah, I'm a psychologist, but there's only so far I can go back trying to figure what's going on or how it is that exists, that humans still are taking.
And we still have a moratorium, by the way, on the death penalty in the state of Oregon. And that began under the Kitzhaber administration. During his first term, he was presiding when the first 2 executions took place. And his second administration, he indicated that he did not want to have to administer anymore and impose the death penalty. Impose a moratorium on the death penalty. And Governor Kate Brown has continued it through today.
Okay. What are the most compelling reasons that folks in support of the death penalty continue to stick with the death penalty? They still have some compelling reasons as to why they say the death penalty is useful.
Well, the core value is probably retribution or revenge.
Revenge.
But it comes in the purpose of, it deters, they say, it deters crime.
But the evidence doesn't show that, does it?
There's no research that shows that. And in fact, the most eminent research body in the country has determined that it doesn't deter or does not deter. Either way, it makes no difference. Tough on crime is an essence for it. The district attorneys, some of the district attorneys, not all of the district attorneys, some of the district attorneys in Oregon are thinking very differently about this, but some of them say, we get people to plead to a lesser crime, and we save money by doing that. That's true, because the death penalty superstructure on how it's managed is very expensive. And if they get somebody to plead to a lower level of murder other than aggravated murder, the case is pretty much finished and it's over with, and they didn't spend millions of dollars on trials and appeals.
And
Those
then
are some of the things.
The person who's in the system, he's told that if you don't cop a plea, then you're going to probably go to have a death penalty.
Yeah, exactly.
And so this is why so many people will choose to plead to something that they didn't do.
Very likely.
I'm getting more complicated here. What are the alternatives to the Oregon death penalty that you espouse?
Well, actually, Frank gets a lot of credit for this because we were out speaking and talking with people, and they say, okay, we know what you're against. You're against executions. You don't want to have anybody killed. Well, what are you for? The alternative in terms of punishment is life without the possibility of parole. It doles out plenty of punishment. It keeps the public safe. It primarily keeps the staff and the other inmates safe as well. And evidenced by the fact that we have, in Oregon, we have 34 people on the row. We have 132 people who are life without the possibility of parole, referred to as the lifers. They, in fact, have a lifers club. These are the best behaved people in the prison system.
Hey.
Frank can talk to that.
It's very, I've not had an audience yet that wasn't surprised to understand that people doing life without the possibility of parole, and even those who have been moved from death row back into general population, are without question your better inmates. A number of reasons for that is the average criminal, or person who's been in a life of crime, you do mature out of a criminal mentality. You get too old to run, you get too old to, so you get older and you mature. And secondly, while in prison, prison becomes home, and they want a stable environment, and they want a predictable routine. In prisons, your most difficult individuals to work with are your youngsters who think they're going to live forever, and they're still trying to prove themselves to themselves and others. But your lifers and those who come off of death row back into prison are your better prisoners.
Yeah, so if you just do the math, you got 34 people on the row who got a death sentence. They're not being executed, they're dying of natural causes. We got 34. You got 132 lifers. You got another 600 and some who are convicted of aggravated murder and got a sentence of life with the possibility of parole. So you add all that up, you have close to 800 people who are convicted of murder. Why did 34 people end up on death row? That's the question that happens. And most times the question was they were poor and they didn't have good defense. They were unfortunate. The nature of their crime looked terrible. We've got cases that people don't even think about. There was one case that one of the perpetrators just died. Mark Pinnell is his name. He died of congestive heart failure. He was an accomplice. Two guys did a robbery. A man was killed in the robbery. They did it together. There was no question about it. He got death sentence, and his partner in crime got a sentence with parole added, and he's out on the street. Been out on the street for 3 years. So why is that? One had a good lawyer, one had a lousy lawyer.
So it's the system then.
It's an arbitrary system.
Or you can have an individual in one county commit the same crime as another individual who commits that crime in Multnomah County. Multnomah County gets charged with a capital crime and put on death row, and when in some other county that doesn't have the resources to try a capital crime, they'll go for a lesser sentence, and this person might get a term of years or life without the possibility of parole, but they committed the same crime. So geographically, there's inconsistencies, it's discriminatory, and it's just fraught with all sorts of frailties.
19 of the 36 counties in Oregon have not pursued a death penalty. They can't afford to do it. The cost of a death penalty trial to a county that has low population and little budget is in the millions. So they don't, it's not practical to think about that. So it becomes very arbitrary.
So money becomes, that it's not justice, it becomes the equation for whether or not a person ought to die.
Well, I was convinced before, and now I'm convinced more than before. Do you think we'll see an end to the death penalty in our lifetimes? Of course, I'm so old now that couldn't be very long. Anyway.
Short term. We're banking on a short term. We would hope within the next couple of years that we're going to have it on the ballot.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We're going to have it on the ballot. The polling numbers are starting to move in our favor. The national polling numbers are moving in our favor. And I think people are learning through our efforts to get people to think about, talk about, learn about the death penalty. People are changing their mind about it. There's a movement across the country. It's got a title even. It's called Conservatives Concerned About the Death Penalty. And these are the most ardent people who supported the death penalty for years and years and years. And they're starting to look at this from a fiscal point of view, how wasteful it is. And lots of these conservatives have a conservative faith commitment to sanctity of life. Nebraska is a good example. They have a unicameral legislature there, one body. They got rid of the death penalty last year, led by conservative Republican legislators.
Wow.
Can you believe that?
No.
Well, think of this. We've killed 2 people in 50 years. Does Oregon really have a death penalty? It's on the books. And those 2 people said, I don't want to appeal my case anymore. I'm just tired of death row. Bring it on. They volunteered. So if they had not volunteered their own execution, Oregon might very well not have executed anyone over the past 50 years. Does Oregon have a death penalty? It's still on the books. We're trying to get it off of the books. In fact, the fact that we've executed only 2 people over 50 years, Oregon statistically has been moved by the organization that decides which states still have the death penalty and don't have. Oregon has been moved in the category practically of not having the death penalty.
Let us answer that. We're going to run out of time, and I want to answer the rest of your questions. What are the alternatives? We want life without parole instead of executions, but we spend in Oregon taxpayer money without any benefit over $28 million every year. $28 million year after year after year, and that does not include incarceration charges. So the alternative we look for is if you get rid of the death penalty, you're going to save a lot of money. We want to readdress that money, put it in law enforcement. That'll deter crime. More services to the mentally ill. That'll deter crime. Better job training. Intervention into abusive households. That'll deter crime. That'll keep young kids from getting into criminality as a way of life. There's so many other ways that we could be spending those millions of dollars that are a benefit, and that's the kind of public policy that works. The death penalty, as Frank states over and over again, is a failed public policy. And we need to change the law.
Well, what about those people who believe that people who commit crime should be punished? Where does that come from? Punishment, the need to punish other human beings.
That's revenge, and that's not justice. It comes from the fact that they think that somebody needs to pay for it. I can tell you, and people, your listeners, try and spend a day in your room and don't go out of your bedroom. Here's people that are in there for life and they can't leave their cell.
And we also try to raise their awareness that capital punishment, bottom line, is a public policy. And it's not an act of vengeance against an individual. And if we can keep the public focused on a public policy, what should a public policy do? It should have positive outcomes. It should be capable of being measured in terms of how is the public safety better for the general public. Capital punishment fails by every measurement. So what we try to do with those who, out of an emotional sense, wants to exact fear and punishment through death on an individual, we try to get them to challenge themselves from the emotional to the practical. What are you accomplishing for the public? Because the public policy should not be an agent of vengeance and punishment, of vengeance. It should not be an agent of vengeance by killing someone.
Loss of liberty is plenty punishment.
Absolutely.
I can't believe it. It makes me nervous to see you two looking at me as though I did something wrong this time. No.
No, you didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah. So you have some future engagements that you're going to be traveling and going to and talking about?
Yeah, we do 6 straight events every month. We have a gentleman who's chaplain in death row in Florida. His name is Dale Ricinella. He's coming for a 4-day tour starting the 14th of March. He'll make speeches at University of Portland, at Willamette University, at Western Oregon University, down in Eugene, down in Roseburg. We've got about 8 different times we'll have discussion groups and get the community people in there and hear that story. His book is The Biblical Truth About the American Death Penalty. Those people conservatives who read the Bible in a very literal sense, go to the blood issue. In Genesis, it talks about the man who sheds another person's blood will have his shed. And the Bible's full of lots of things that they can't be done literally.
Rich Bible, the Old Testament and New Testament.
Yeah.
Now, we're running out of time again, I just suggested a moment ago, but let's see if you want to say something to the viewers, whatever comes to your mind based on what we've been talking about, anything else, and look at that camera and tell the viewers what's your final
If you would like
thought.
to be involved, go to www.oadp.org. That's our website. We are looking for people who are interested in this. If you'll help set up discussion groups, if you want to volunteer, you want to get involved, we have an advisory council, we have a board, we have a lot of active people, and help us get the word out. That's our job. If somebody believes differently, we respect that position. We just try and inform them, and you can be a part of that.
Let's save 30 seconds for Frank.
Ditto. Can't say it any better than Ron. It's one of the reasons he's our board chair.
You guys are delightful guests, so let's wind down now and show a few public service announcements, and then we'll talk some more after the cameras are off, huh? To watch my shows on the web, Google Don Baham, YouTube. There's hundreds of shows on there through the years, all kinds of guests and all kinds of interesting topics. And the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, our civil liberties are more in jeopardy now than they have been for a long, long time. Go to that website. And remember KFC, my favorite, not Kentucky Fried Chicken, Dr. Don's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable. Be kind, be friendly, and be charitable. To you too, Mike. To you too. And you too, and you too. See you next time. Thank you. Good night.